As you know, I'm always looking for new ghost stories, and you can tell your ghost story to me in person if you book at the Phantom History House Bed and Breakfast. Go to phantomhistoryhouse.com, check out our 4 themed rooms, and book, and we will talk very soon. Hey everybody, Steve here at the Phantom History House in our dining room, and tonight I'm talking to Barry Merwin, who is with Unfortunate Travels, and we actually met about a year ago at a paranormal festival event. We've been trying to connect for about a year, and I'm so glad we were finally able to do that. You're a hard guy to track down. You're busy.
Yeah, we were playing tag for a little bit there.
Yeah, absolutely. But I know it's going to be totally worth the wait because you have a really cool place to talk about the Cresson Sanatorium up there, and I believe it's in Pennsylvania. But before we dive into all that, I wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what it is that you do and what is Unfortunate Travels.
Okay. Well, I'm a paranormal investigator. Unfortunate Travels is pretty much kind of I guess you consider it the show mantra, the show name of it all. But I do travel to different locations, and my biggest thing is I try to come up with different ideas and experiments and stuff like that you may not see per se along the lines of most investigators. I try to think outside of the box with some things, but mostly I'm there to gain the experiences. I really try to connect more on a physical basis with the places more than using tools or instruments. Try to give the location a chance to interact with me personally.
Mhm. Do you think, I mean, do you have some kind of intuition? Are you a psychic? I mean, where are you on like that line?
No, the one thing that I've noticed, I don't have so much intuition, but I've noticed over the course of going to these places that I do pick up voices audibly a lot more than most people do. And I thought I was going crazy for a while when that was happening, but listening back to video or audio recordings, everything that I was saying I was hearing, I was actually capturing.
So you would hear it in real time and then you would hear it on the playback later on.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, that is rare because a lot of people don't actually hear it in the moment.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing investigations?
So I've been full time since 2021
Okay.
is when I really got into it. The whole swing of this, it was kind of crazy. Is like I started as a sports podcast and I ended up in the paranormal. It kind of transitioned through that. I went from a sports podcast to doing just a kind of general talk podcast. And one of the topics was ghost hunting and folklore. And then I decided that I had to go ghost hunting. And the first place I went was Eloise Insane Asylum in Detroit. And it completely blew my mind.
So your first investigation was in an insane asylum? Talk about
Yeah,
jumping in.
it's supposedly top 5 most haunted in the country. And yeah, I went in there and I think everything that you could look for paranormal wise happened that night.
Wow. So you were hooked from the very beginning, it sounds like.
Yeah, I couldn't stop thinking about it, couldn't stop talking about it. And the unfortunate travels part of it was actually supposed to be part of the podcast of general talk because we would talk about some crazy stuff and we wanted to kind of create a secondary filming opportunity where anything that we came up with we could go and actually try it and film it as unfortunate travels. But that kind of progressed and rolled right into the paranormal and it's stuck with ever since.
That's amazing. And I know that you've been to quite a few places. Ballpark, how many places have you investigated? Any idea?
Oh man. I bet I've probably been to at least 50, I want
Wow.
to say. Some of them multiple times I've gone back to. I've been to Fairfield County 8 times alone. That was it. That was this last year. In 2022, 8 times I went to Fairfield.
So obviously there was something there that had your attention and you wanted to learn more. How much do you research the history of a location before you go? Do you try to do that beforehand, or do you like to go in as cold as possible?
So actually, my wife does the research, and what I like to do is I go in with no knowledge, and I try to get names, I try to get dates, I try to get interactions, and after the fact, it's awesome to actually match it up with the history that she found. Getting the names of the people, dates or times of death or whatever the case may be that happened there. and it's happened a lot.
So what you have found has matched up with the research she did beforehand.
Yeah. Yep.
That's got to be very rewarding. Like you're onto something.
Yeah, absolutely.
So are you based in Indianapolis? Is that where like
Uh,
home is for you?
no, actually, Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Oh, okay. Okay. We just happened to meet in Indianapolis.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. We were invited down there to attend that event and set up shop there, so
Awesome.
it just worked out.
Yeah, that was such a great day. I'm in Florida, I'm in Tampa. I just happened to be there for something else and stumbled across that event. So
Yeah,
it was a one of the best parts of the trip that we took up there. So let's talk a little bit about this Cresson Sanitarium. I know it was called the SAN for short,
yep,
and originally it was a tuberculosis hospital in Pennsylvania, I believe.
yep.
I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about it. It had several iterations over its life.
Yeah, so it started as a tuberculosis hospital and it kind of phased through. So I went from a tuberculosis hospital to like a state mental institution. And after that transition, I believe it was 1983 to a state prison. And that was open until 2013. But you look at all three of those situations and just knowing the kind of agony and suffering that probably went across those grounds for, gosh, 100 years. I mean, there's a lot to be left.
There is, and it's huge. From what I saw on the videos and on their website, it's massive.
That's why I booked 2 days, and I think out of, I believe, 27 buildings, 15 of them are known to be haunted, but I maybe saw 4 or 5
So
out of
there's a
two
whole lot
days.
more for you to check out.
There's a ton.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know it covers acres and acres. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but I have it written down somewhere. So when you do an investigation, are you there only at night? Do you go in the day as well? How does that usually work for you?
So it really depends on the location and the time that they allow me to come in. I like to get there earlier because I do like to get, my static footage. I really want to try to portray the beauty of the place as well as the investigation at night, because as dilapidated as these places are, there's just a certain level of beauty behind all of it. So I really try to portray that the best I can. Daytime's obviously the easiest point to get your shots. Um, not so easy to do it when it's dark out, but I do like to go in a little bit earlier, but it really depends on the place itself and the time allotment that they allow you to come in.
Okay. So when you walked into this place, when you walked into the Crescent, what was your reaction? What was it like? Did you walk in and know immediately, wow, this is going to be a very active 2 days? What was
When
your take?
honestly pulling up, you have this long, I think it's like a half-mile drive, and you kind of come out of the trees and it's there. You see barbed wired fences and just buildings for forever. But seeing that and seeing, I guess, the land itself and how these buildings stood, I just felt it. You just knew that something's going to happen tonight.
Yeah.
And I think I went in pretty confident that that's what I was going to get.
How big was your team with you on this one?
So I'm solo, but I did go with good friends of mine, POV Paranormal, and they're consistent of 4 team members. But yeah, they're seasoned vets. They know what they're doing. So it was awesome to be there with them. I still kind of took myself away and I went and did my own thing because I like to get the personal experience. But we did link up later for some of the craziest stuff that happened that night.
So let's talk about that a little bit. What you before we started recording and in our conversations before today, you talked about
Yeah.
how this is probably one of the most haunted locations you've ever been in,
Yeah.
or at least in the top five or so.
Yeah.
What so I guess what makes you think that? Was it because of how much activity it was, or was there some specific things that made you think that?
So there was actually a few things that happened. When I was with POV Paranormal, we had gone into the hospital portion of it, and we were actually in what would have been like an OBGYN, like the way it was set up, the chair had the stirrups and everything. And I was the first one into that room, and I actually had set up a REM pod with a fresh battery, and that thing started going ballistic. So they came in after the fact, and I had it sitting on that stool or that chair with the stirrups. So we had a woman with us, and she climbed up in there, and I had a tripwire, and tripwire is just pretty much like a K2 meter on a bunch of different nodes. So it measures the electromagnetic fields. But I draped that across her, and the light that kept going off was right by her groin,
Hmm.
consistently by her groin. So we were pretty intrigued by that, and trying to communicate with whatever it was. She had a backpack that she had set on a table right next to her. And as I was standing and filming her, I saw the bag move. So after reviewing the footage later on and I zoomed in on it, you could see the strap get pulled. Now we were lucky enough actually that POV Paranormal had a different angle of the backpack, and you can actually see it get lifted up, set back down, and then pulled to the side. So that was the first of the craziness that happened. As we moved down in the same building, we came to an X-ray room, and we could hear what sounded like people talking. So we kind of went silent, and you heard just two big steps outside of the room. And I went out to try to investigate, make sure nobody was coming in there. And obviously didn't find anybody. But later on that night, we caught on camera what looked like a figure actually walking across in front of this window. And I was live at the time, so somebody actually took a still shot of that, and we were matching it up with one of our team members, and it looks like there is an old man in a nightgown that was coming across the hall to another room that we captured. The first night we were there, though, before any of this happened, it was really foggy. Like it was kind of out of a horror movie foggy. So
Perfect.
yeah, I walked out there and I kind of go like, I don't know what I just got myself into, but we're here. And the big admin building, which is the biggest building on this property, I turned and I said, there's a light on in that building. And we're looking, and you can see what looks like a ball of light. And we started watching it actually going window to window. So we thought somebody actually broke in while we were there. So we took off to that building and we swept it from top to bottom, and we couldn't find it. But this thing, it moves so fast. And you're talking about going between walls to get to new windows. We saw this ball of light just floating there. So it was wild.
What was that building originally? Do you know?
I believe it was an administration building. It could have been a hospital as well. But it is like when you look up Cresson, like it is the main building that they show.
Okay, and that's a huge building too, like
Yeah,
you
it's
said.
massive.
Yeah, yeah. Going back to the bag moving. I mean, that takes a lot of energy for an apparition or a spirit to be able to do something like that.
Yeah. See, I've been to a lot of places. I've watched doors shut. I've seen things like that, but it I don't think I've ever experienced watching a backpack that was stable and still get moved the way it did. It's still one of the coolest things I think that I've ever seen or captured.
Well, yeah. I mean, a lot of people don't get to see something like that. A lot of times, it's usually a door creaking or something slightly moving. That sounds pretty significant. What do you think it is there that's still roaming around? Is it patients? Is it former employees? Is it inmates? Is it all the above? Any thoughts?
Um, so I think you got a mix. I think you have former patients. I think there's said to be some employees still roaming around there, but you also have inmates. And I know that the building that we were in when that happened, I believe, was also used to treat inmates of the prison that came through there. And with the interaction that our female investigator was getting, the a lot more attention from it, we started kind of narrowing down that we think we were dealing with an inmate that it was pretty aggressive. Even having the we had the obelisk running,
Mm.
and it said something on the lines of like them leaving, wanting the guys in this room to leave, and leave her there. She obviously didn't want that, but yeah, it was trippy.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And like you said, a little bit aggressive. And I know that there was a group of you in that room, and there, of course, you always feel like there's strength in numbers when you're all
Yeah,
together.
yeah,
But I know you said that you wanted to go out and explore on your own a little bit and have
yeah,
some of your own personal experiences.
yeah.
Anything stand out for you on that part?
So you anytime you're walking through there, I constantly felt like I was being followed, and I don't get on edge like that. So my head was on a swivel the whole time. Um, when I was down in the tunnels, there's tunnels that run underneath, stretches quite a ways. Um, you just I felt like something was rushing up on me the whole time. Um, but actually, again, and this was when we were all together down in the tunnels. We had actually knocked on a pipe trying to get it to knock back, and we got a loud boom come across that pipe. And it was right after that we had turned to start walking down a ways, and we kind of came to a stop, and something like you could hear it rushing up on us. It was like right across the cement. We all reacted. I almost took I almost took two of their team members out. I I've never tried to run so fast in my life.
That's terrifying because I'm guessing it's a tunnel, so it's fairly dark, so you
Yeah,
can't see what you're hearing,
yeah,
which just adds to it. And I know a lot of these old sanatoriums have these interconnecting tunnels, that helped staff move from space to space. If the weather was bad, I knew it could move patients and patients who weren't so lucky.
yeah,
I know that after the 1950s, it shifted, like we said, to those for developmental disabilities. But one of the videos I was watching, actually on the Cresson Sanatorium website, talked about a graveyard, a cemetery nearby, where some of the victims of TB were buried. Did you check out that area at all, or did you even see
I
that?
wasn't lucky enough to actually get over there to check it out. I figured booking 2 days, I was going to have all the time in the world. But yeah, that time went really fast when you're in there.
I bet. Yeah,
Yeah,
and again, it's so huge in so many buildings and covers, I think it's 400 acres is what I read. So it's a whole lot of space. There's no way you can cover it in 2 days. Um, so it sounds like throughout your entire visit there, you felt like you were kind of being observed almost.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's the one thing that I actually heard about a lot going into here is that you consistently feel like you're being watched. And, I kind of went in naive about it, kind of brushed it off. And it was just the second you're there and you're walking the grounds. I mean, I'm agitated and, I'm nervous. I'm looking around, and it felt like something was constantly there just watching you.
Other than the time in the tunnel when you felt like something was rushing from you and you took out two of the other team members, is there a moment that stands out there that you were like the most either impressed or frightened that, oh, geez, there's something in this place? I mean, the stirrup incident is insane. The
Yeah.
tunnel's insane. Those are both amazing. I just didn't know if there was anything else that stood out to you as well.
I I think it was actually in the prison. We went in there as a group, but for some reason, all of the interaction we were getting, whether it be on the equipment or through the obelisk, it was kind of calling me out. So, and I don't know why, but I actually at the end when we finished up, I said, "Why don't you guys head out and I'm going to sit here." And I sat in the darkness, and it was right at that time when they had left. I started hearing what sounded like walking coming. So I'm kind of in a corner, and there's a doorway to my right, there's another doorway behind me off to my left, and it kept sounding like something was coming down both of those corridors heading towards me. At that time too, I have my night vision camera running with a full battery, and I started seeing the battery draining really fast. And then my light on my camera started flickering. And I knew at that time, I said, you're trying to take this power away and leave me in the dark, and I'm not having it. So it's time to pack up and move.
Now, when you said it was calling you out, how so? What was that like?
So what we did is actually I have handcuffs and all that for different experiments. But it was me and one of their team members that had actually gone in the separate wings of this prison, and we both went and got locked up in these cells. And we had different equipment in front of us, and during that time we were running an Estes session as well. So as their lead investigator was asking questions and their female investigator was answering, it kept pointing towards me. They kept kind of talking about me. So as that was happening too, I had equipment, REM pod in front of me is going off, and and all that. So it kind of left us with that in the end, and I knew that I had to sit there and try to get through it.
Right. It definitely had, you definitely had whatever's attention, what was in
Yeah.
there. And I'm
Yep.
sure a place that big and with that kind of history, there's more than one entity in there.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
you were there for 2 days, you covered a small portion of it, but how
Yeah.
many entities do you think you encountered or discovered during your visit?
Um, I can say, let's see, two, three, four, five. I bet you we came across 5 to 7 alone.
Okay. And like you said, it sounds like it's a variety of inmates, former patients,
Yeah.
administrators, a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Wow. Um, and again, 2 days is not a long enough time to be in a place like that. So I'm assuming you plan to go back.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I know when we were going live for a portion of it, we have a lot of paranormal friends out there, and theirs perked right up and they were all into it. So they're interested in going. So we're talking about trying to do another 2 days and getting a few more people out there to hopefully cover more ground and get more people to have experiences within some of the buildings that we didn't get to. There's a lot of places there that I plan on revisiting though, just for the experience that I had. I like to try to see if something recreates, or if it, that same spirit or entity seems to be roaming that same area, just to see if we can get the same interaction.
Right. See some, well, here's some familiar faces, I should say, not that you saw
Yeah.
anything. What does the place look like on the inside? The parts that you saw, does it look like a prison still? Does it look like an institution?
So
What did you see?
it's honestly, I mean, you kind of get everything. So there's two prison buildings, I guess, on the property with all the cells, the walkway, the whole deal. You got the prison or the guard post right in the center of it all with all the windows, and all that's really intact and still in good shape. The hospital rooms or the hospital area, like I said, they still got some of the old beds in there. They have the X-ray machine still sitting in there. So yeah, a lot of it is still showing signs of what it was. It wasn't hard for us to figure out kind of what kind of building we were in when we were going through it.
It sounds like it's almost like a time capsule.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you kind of get that feeling like a Chernobyl. You feel like you kind of went into this war zone or something that just nobody exists. The owner of the place just kind of shook our hands and said, "Have fun," and left. I mean, we were the only ones on that property, both nights.
And not only are you the only one on the property, it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. So
Yeah.
you're probably the only people for miles.
Yeah. I mean, we were up in the mountains, to get there, and that fog didn't help any. You really felt like you were alone when that fog rolled in.
Sounds like a Hollywood set, which is perfect.
That's
Um,
best sense. Yeah.
just to try to get some geography here, what is like the nearest large city? Like, where are we talking about in Pennsylvania?
I think if you're looking at the nearest largest city, probably Pittsburgh.
Okay,
Yep.
okay. So that kind of gives us, and I know it's probably a long way from there, but at least kind of gives a general estimation. I know it's kind of towards the center of the state, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Okay.
was yeah, it wasn't too far out of Ohio. But I know you still had a ways to go to get to Pittsburgh.
Okay. Now I know you said that the owner kind of just greeted you and then like disappeared. Did he or she preface with anything and say, "This place is crazy. You're going to meet a lot of crazy entities," or was it just very general?
It was kind of general, but they have their own paranormal team that does the tours and all that. And I did speak with a couple of them, and they were kind of pointing us in directions and pretty much guaranteeing that you're going to come across something tonight.
No. Well,
Yeah.
again, with a history like that, it's hard that you wouldn't come across something
Yeah.
like that. And I'm interested on your take on this too. Every time I do one of these conversations, I always ask a version of this question.
Okay.
But we kind of talked about it a little bit. But what do you think it is about the energy there that's keeping these entities there? Were they unhappy? Were they happy? Was it a mix of both? Because I know a tuberculosis sanatorium was supposed to be a happy place, try to
Right.
help cure these people. Obviously, that's not how it always went. So I'm curious about your take on the energy of the place.
So I think I got a theory for kind of like all of paranormal with places like this. And you have a lot of different situations that happen. You can have sudden death, um, agonizing death. You can have, in my opinion, if you're dealing with like a state institution or mental illness or something like that, you can also have confusion after death. And I really believe that there's a lot of different situations when death comes, they can actually cause somebody to still be here roaming. Whether it be being scared of crossing over, being confused about how to cross over, maybe being so angry and spiteful that you refuse to cross over. I really think that you probably run into a lot of that, especially when you're dealing with a location that pretty much had every type of personality and event that there could have been, on those grounds.
You're right. And what I was just pulling up, looking at some details of the location, I know it was considered like a medium security prison, but they had some like hardened criminals in there. I know it says
Yeah.
there was a serial killer and a
Yeah.
rapist and a convicted murderer. So these weren't just, DUIs and traffic tickets. These
No,
were
not at
serious.
all. And
Yeah.
honestly, going into those prisons, um, when I walked in, I even said like medium security. Like for one, the grounds are just lined in barbed wire. Like, you try to escape, you're getting cut up. There's no doubt about it. But the way that these prisons were actually designed and set up too, I felt like it was a little more than medium security.
Yeah, that's what it looks like on the photos as well. And I know that when it converted to a prison, of course, the barbed wire and all that was added. It was still fenced off and very hard to get to, from what I understand.
Yeah.
And what I was reading was that before the prison, not a lot, but the patients were male, female, younger, older. So it was a mix of everybody.
Yeah.
And again, I know I kind of asked you this, identifying who a specific entity is not easy to do.
Right.
But do you know if any of those younger patients were still hanging around, or do you have any idea if that's even if you can figure that out?
So I personally, I mean, we don't have any proof of it, but I don't believe that we came across any younger children or anything of that nature. Everything that happened really seemed to kind of be either more aggressive, kind of made itself seem bigger. I can't say for sure that we didn't, but I don't feel that we came across any children or anybody younger, teenagers, anything like that. Everything to me kind of seemed like it was older in a sense.
Older, and like you said, more aggressive and
Yeah.
probably male. So I'm guessing most of what you ran into was possibly affiliated with the prison.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
maybe. But again, you were there 2 days, and it's a big complex. So who knows what you'll find next time?
Absolutely.
Um, what is your I guess in all of your investigations, Cresson, wherever you go, what is your overall goal whenever you go into a place like this? Is it to find that concrete evidence that something's there? Is it a photo? Is it an EVP? What is it? What is your ultimate goal?
Honestly, it's going in and trying to be able to walk out with a story to tell. Between gathering the history of the location and the experiences that I have, being able to kind of connect those two and being able to tell a story. In the end, I would love to figure out how to get really good at this to the point, whether there's a piece of equipment that miraculously gets built, to actually be able to interact in a way where, you can actually have them tell you their story and being able to portray that for them. That is kind of the thing that I go in doing is when I'm talking, I'm trying to ask them like, do you have family still around? Is there anything that you want somebody to know? asking them the simple questions, did you work here? And I'm trying to really break down the puzzle and narrow down to who I may be talking to, and trying to gather that information enough to bring it out and be truthful with what I'm actually conveying and telling.
Right. Trying to tie that into, like you said, the historical record and who are
Yeah.
these people and who was actually here, which is really hard to do. And
Yeah.
until we get that miracle product that,
Yeah.
that can communicate
Absolutely.
over. It's come a long way though. I mean, I
Got it.
know probably in just the 2 years that you've been doing this professionally, I'm sure you've seen changes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a not, I wouldn't say I'm not a fan. I don't like to use too much equipment. Like I said, I like to use my body, my senses. But the Ovilus has completely blown my mind. I can't count how many times that thing has said my name. Yeah, it's amazing to me.
Yeah, and it really, I'm sure it just gives you this, I don't know, chills, this feeling of being watched, all the above when
Oh
it
yeah,
recognizes you personally.
yeah.
Yeah. Does that happen often when you do investigations? Do you think that you have a connection to?
Um, so I've gone to a few places where I've started wondering. There was a name that kept popping up quite a bit. Beth. Beth kept popping up a lot, and it seemed like as soon as her name would get said, then everything would start kind of going crazy. So I started kind of joking around saying, "Oh, it must have been boring." So Beth had to come show up and ramp up the stuff. She's kind of calmed down. I haven't seen or heard her too much, but luckily I've been lucky enough to actually still experience stuff. But I have wondered that if there's something that kind of travels along, and just kind of hangs out and decides it wants to show up and play a little bit. I'm not sure though.
Yeah, and that's the thing about the whole paranormal world is there's so much that we don't know. I've heard that spirits are connected to a place, they can be connected to a thing, they can be connected to a person.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a relatively newer theory that, they're not bound to any one place. They can kind of go wherever they want.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, that kind of goes to my theory, and I've really thought about it a lot because I've gone into places and I get a lot of interaction with names or people that have, in my opinion, based off of what I see and do research on, have never been there. So I kind of have a theory that when you open yourself up for communication, you're almost sending a beacon up that's kind of saying, "Hey, we're open for business," and things may flood in to start communicating with you. That may not be even people you're trying to connect with to begin with.
right. And I like that analogy of, you're sending up a beacon and saying, hey, here I am.
Yeah.
Um, a couple more questions for you before I let you go. One more about Crescent in particular. When you go back, whenever that might be, do you have a specific location or a specific technique or something you want to try there that maybe you didn't have a chance last time?
I plan on going right back to the building and the room where the backpack moved. That's going to be my first stop, and I honestly will probably spend. I plan on going for a couple days again, but that will be probably an area in a building that I spend at least half of a day in.
Okay.
That building gave a lot, and I'm really curious about it. I really wish that I would have come across it because that was the last stop before our second day was over. So I really wish we would have found that a little bit sooner and been able to try to get more out of it. But that's definitely going to be one, and probably the tunnels. I'm going to spend some time down in the tunnels again and try to interact with whatever might be down there.
Yeah, and I like talking about that room. Kind of picking up where you left off last
Yeah.
time. If it was towards the end.
Yep.
My other question for you is not related to Crescent specifically, but your own experience. And you may not remember or have an answer to this, but do you recall what your first paranormal experience was, like your first encounter with an entity or a spirit or something unexplainable?
Like prior to investigating.
Yeah, I mean, you could have been a kid, you could have been in
Okay.
high school.
Yeah. So I would have been 20 at the time. And it was like one of the first places I rented. And it was actually a duplex, but it was an old farmhouse that was turned into a duplex. So it had the original woodworking, like these door handles, everything was on a drawstring. But I had actually worked second shift at that time. So I got home at about 11:30, and my girlfriend at the time was upstairs and she was sleeping. So I take a shower, and as I'm finishing and getting out of the shower, I heard somebody walking up to the door, and I'm thinking it's her, and the door pulls open, and I kind of grabbed it because obviously I'm I'm just out of the shower. I'll be out in a second. And it had a like the hook latches to lock it, like it was that old. So I latched it shut and I heard her walk away. So I finished getting dressed, and I actually started hearing the footsteps coming back. And I turned to the door and I watched the door handle turn from side to side. And I said, all right, I'm done. Flipped the latch, opened it, and there was nobody there. So I stood there for about 5 seconds trying to rack my head around what just happened. And then I bolted. I was like Usain Bolt, just up the stairs, and I leapt on top of her. And I'm like, tell me you were downstairs. Tell me you were downstairs. And she's like, I've been sleeping. And I kind of threw my hands up and just I didn't know what to think. And I just kind of like, oh man. And I walked right back out of the room, back downstairs. And I stood there and stared at that door for about 30 minutes trying to figure it out.
Trying to figure out how could this have happened? There has to
Yeah.
be a rational.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Wow. Yeah, I always ask that question because it's so funny when you do what we kind of do in this world now, and you look back. If you could go back to your 20-year-old self, you'd probably like, get the REM pod, get this
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
You didn't know anything,
Absolutely.
didn't know anything about any of that.
Cameras, quick.
Before we say goodbye, just so anybody who's listening or watching this on YouTube can track you down,
Yeah.
what's the best place to find you? I know you're on Instagram. I'm sure you're on other social media. Where can people find you?
So Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, everything's at Unfortunate Travels. Um, uh, all of my locations that I film at, I do post to YouTube. I'm kind of in a hiatus right now, just with summer and everything, but I'm going to be filling in some places, and I have a long stretch in Iowa coming the end of September. I'm actually doing 3 locations in 4 days in Iowa. But once I film those, I'll be posting those up on YouTube. But I do go live every single investigation through TikTok. If service is kind of wonky for TikTok, I'll jump to YouTube. But yeah, interaction happens mostly through TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram.
Okay, and unfortunate travels on all of those channels. It sounds like excellent. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, Barry. I know we chased each other for about a year, but I'm so glad we were finally able to connect. And
Me too.
thank you for mentioning Cresson Sanatorium. Again, it's a place I was not that familiar with, so I'm really interested in learning more about it, and hope to get myself up there at some point as well.
Hey, I tell you what, if I'm getting it booked, I'll let you know when. You're more than welcome.
Awesome. I love that. Definitely. I'm sure we'll keep in touch. I know we've been
Yeah.
chatting for forever. We'll continue to do so. And I'll keep an eye out for YouTube videos and more coming later on this year. So thanks again for taking the time to talk to me. And if you are watching this, go check out Unfortunate Travels on all the social channels. And of course, we'll have a link in the video too. Thanks so much, Barry. You enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy your hiatus before it gets too crazy.
All right. You too. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Hey, thanks so much for watching that. Remember, go to phantomhistory.com and sign up on the newsletter so you are alerted when we have a new podcast. And check out our new bed and breakfast at phantomhistoryhouse.com, where you can book your stay and we can talk ghost stories in person in the library. See you then.